Hi, and welcome back to our online lecture here on the fall of the Roman Empire. In part one, we talked about the economic and political factors that weakened Rome, and here we're going to continue on by looking at the social and the military factors that weakened Rome. So we're going to pick it up right there. So social. When I think of social, I think of people. Situations that deal with people, like social media, social events. It's all dealing with people. So the people were slowly losing their confidence in the empire. And what you have to think about, the empire was huge. There were a lot of people who never saw their emperor, who never got to deal with the actual economics or politics of Rome. And so it would have been very easy for people to become kind of disillusioned to what it meant to be Roman, and to really say, you know what, I don't really know what the empire's doing for me, as they didn't really see themselves as part of it. Now, this one I think is the most important one to talk about. There was a huge contrast between the rich and the poor. That was still very wide in Rome. And you might say, that sounds like an economic problem. And it is. But what often happens in history is those have-nots often resent the haves. Meaning, those who don't have much really look at the people who have wealth and power and really start to dislike them, or simply resent them. And that can cause a major divide amongst your people. When 93% of your people are either poor or enslaved in Rome, certainly you're going to have a lot of people looking at the small, rich elite with discontent, with that resentment. So that's going to divide a lot of the people here in Rome. So what that leads to then is a decline in the interest in public affairs. I mean, if you're poor and you're just looking for your next meal, if that is what your sole existence depends on, why would you care about voting? Why would you care about your emperor? Why would you care about being Roman when food is your number one priority? So people stop really becoming a part of what Rome is doing. That's important. I mean, you're losing your patriotism. You're losing your backbone of what it meant to be Roman. So some major social issues going on here in Rome. The last one is military. We had already talked about how they had money issues. So if they have money issues, naturally they're going to have low funds for defense. You got to pay your soldiers, right? Well, if you can't pay your soldiers, you need somebody to defend the land. And so if you can't pay Romans to do it, you got to find somebody else who will fight for you. So you go for mercenaries. Mercenaries are foreign soldiers, and they were hired because they accepted lower pay. And I think this is problematic because if you think about it, when you're fighting a battle, the most dedicated soldiers are those who are fighting for country, fighting to save an ideology, something that they believe in. Well, if mercenaries are just simply fighting because they're getting paid, they're less likely to go out there and fight hard and fight for that country. So what ends up as a result of this is your soldiers are less disciplined and less loyal. And so the Roman military, which once could have defeated anybody, is now severely weakened, and that opens the door for other problems to come to Rome's doorstep. So our four factors that we just covered are the economic, the political, the social, and the military factors that weaken Rome. Now, Rome's still intact, it's still together, but it's in a position now where it can easily be toppled by a number of different events, and we're going to build up to that here momentarily. I did say I wanted to take a quick little detour and talk about two Roman emperors. The first one I want to talk about very quickly is Emperor Diocletian. Emperor Diocletian becomes emperor in 284 AD, and really his biggest contribution is he divides the empire. I mean, most giant pieces of land in history have been bureaucratically divided so that they're easier to govern. I mean, we have 50 states here in the United States. After Genghis Khan's empire, after he died, they broke it up into 4 pieces. Alexander's empire was divided into different territories. I mean, this is just something that's happened. It's easier to govern small pieces of land. So he divides the Roman Empire into 2 pieces, the Greek-speaking east and the Latin-speaking west. You can kind of see it just dividing it right down here on a map. So it ends up looking like this. Now, this is also setting us up for our next part of our unit on Byzantium, because this is the Western Roman Empire here. Here you have the capital of Rome. This is the part of the empire that's really severely weakening. Whereas over here in the east, which will become known as Byzantium, things are doing okay. It's, hanging on. There are trade routes and different things that are going to keep this side alive. And again, in my class, we're going to spend the next couple of days looking at what Byzantium is, why it was Roman, and why it continued to thrive while the West died. So you can just see the division here. That's really why I like this map. You can see it kind of right down the middle. The other emperor I want to talk about is Emperor Constantine. I like Constantine. There's two parts to his story here. The first one's a little bit of a review for us, because in our Christianity part of this unit, we talked about how he embraced Christianity due to the vision he had at the Battle of Milvian Bridge. So I think I told my classes this story, so this is a little bit of a review for you. Constantine was fighting another Roman, and the winner of that battle was going to become the next emperor of Rome. It was called the Battle of Milvian Bridge, and one night, as he was going to bed, he saw a vision of the Christian symbol. It wasn't the cross yet, it was the Chi symbol, and I'll show you this on the next slide. But he has this vision of the Christian symbol. He decides the next morning to have it painted on all the shields of his soldiers. He goes into battle and he wins. So he sees this as a sign from God that Christianity is legit. And he says, you know what, I got to go out of my way to protect Christians. So he wins at Milvian Bridge, makes him the sole ruler of Rome, and he will become the first Christian Roman emperor. Basically, he decides on his deathbed to become a Christian. So it's not like he fully embraces Christianity during his life. He's dying in bed and says, okay, I'll become a Christian. But the biggest thing that he had done is he issued the Edict of Milan, which is also known as the Edict of Toleration, which allowed Christians to worship freely. Prior to this, it was illegal to be a Christian. Now he is saying to millions of people throughout the empire, you can be a Christian if you want to be. And that is a huge reason Christianity grows and spreads. And so Rome, intricately involved with that. Now, how does he fit into this story? Well, I told you they moved the capital over to Byzantium. They moved the capital from Rome over to Byzantium. And it's Emperor Constantine who does that. So he builds a new city, and, like anybody at that time, you name it after yourself if you're an important person. So the new city is later renamed Constantinople in modern-day Turkey. It's still there. It's called Istanbul. It's a huge city, a thriving city today. And really the whole reason they moved it over there is because the eastern half of the empire was still doing well. It was flourishing due to trade and wealth. And again, that's going to make more sense when we get to the Byzantium part of this unit. So here's a picture of the Battle of Milvian Bridge. You can see Romans fighting Romans in there, and you can kind of see angels flying over top, kind of protecting Constantine and his soldiers. And here is the Chi symbol that he used to paint on the shields of his soldiers. But anyway, we need to come back to finishing off Rome, right? We know Rome is severely weakened by those four different factors. Let's talk about how the Western Empire crumbles. So the decline of the Western Roman Empire took place over many years. And that's almost misleading, because when the Pax Romana ended in 180 AD, it would be 296 years until Rome would fall. That's a long time. So social, political, economic, and military issues weakened the empire, but it was still intact. The thing that's going to take it out, the thing that's going to finish the Romans, the immediate cause of the fall of Rome, is going to come from outside invasions from Germanic tribes. So the final fall came from outside invasions from Germanic tribes. And I want to spend just a couple of moments and talk about what this means. So I'm going to reference this map. I know it's kind of small, but you should be able to see it. Here's Roman lands right here over in the west, modern-day Europe, right? Well, from Mongolia came early ancestors of the Mongols called the Huns. They start pushing west towards Europe. Now, they're not the ones who invade Roman lands. As they get closer to Roman lands, they come in contact with a whole bunch of Germanic peoples. Lots of different names, lots of different tribes. Vandals, Visigoths, Lombards, Saxons, Franks. All of these groups are fairly small. They don't have real organized armies, although they are warriors in certain respects. They can't read and write. They're not sophisticated. They're not civilized. And so they see the Huns coming, and they say, we got to get out of town, because if you stay, the Huns are going to slaughter you. So those Germanic peoples start moving south into Roman lands. So that's what these Germanic invasions are all about. So the Huns, which are early Mongol nomads, pushed Germanic peoples onto Roman lands. And because Rome had been severely weakened by those 4 factors that we had talked about earlier, the Roman Empire was just too weak to combat this. They couldn't combat the invasions. A couple hundred years earlier, the Roman legions, the Roman military, would have had no problem stopping these Germanic invasions. But that's not the case here anymore. So these Roman lands, which were once safe, occupied by Romans, occupied by Roman military, are now overrun by these uncivilized barbarians, and that's the way the Romans looked at them, really, who are, they're hungry, they're poor, they want food, and their way of life was pretty lawless. I mean, they did not have written laws. Like, when I say lawless, they literally didn't have laws, and a lot of times if you wanted something, you just took it. So if you needed food, you came in, you took it. That might mean stealing, that might mean killing. Rome became a really unsafe place to live. Like, the city of Rome, which once had 1 million people, became a super unsafe place to live. It went from a population of about 1 million people down to like 10,000. It's like a 99% drop in population because it was overrun by all these Germanic people. And those who valued their lives and wanted to live literally left and headed for the hills. They went to other places that were much safer. So the last Roman emperor, his name was Romulus Augustulus. He was ousted by these Germanic forces in 476 AD. He left. He was deposed. He no longer ruling, which means the Romans were no longer ruled by Romans. The Roman Empire falls in 476 AD. So Attila the Hun is the one who moved in from Mongolia. Again, he's not the one who moved into Roman lands. He pushed these Germanic peoples into Roman lands. And this map shows us a pretty good look at that. So here we have the Huns coming in, but they're pushing the Ostrogoths, the Burgundians, the Franks, Angles, Saxons, Lombards. And you're not going to need to know any of those names for your test, but all of these groups start moving south into Roman lands and disrupting Roman life to the point where Romulus Augustulus leaves, he's deposed, he's no longer the emperor of Rome, and Rome ceases to exist. So again, coming back to our Jenga example, the empire had grown so weak and so tall, and it just takes a little push to knock it over. I think there was an example in one time or another where the Roman military could have easily stopped this, but that's not the case anymore. So our result, our end, the Western Roman Empire was no more, but the Eastern Empire would continue to thrive as a region known today as Byzantium. So this part of the empire in orange here has fallen. It's overrun by all these different Germanic tribes. But the East is hanging on. It takes on a new identity as Byzantium, and you're going to learn more about that the next couple of days. So if we come back to our constructive response question, it says summarize the factors that contributed to the decline of the Roman Empire. We can talk about, and the way I would answer it is I would talk about one economic factor, one social factor, one political factor, and one military factor. We have several in the notes from each of those. So pick one from each of those examples and then talk about the immediate cause of those Germanic invasions. That should easily give you 5 or 6 sentences, and you should have everything you need to answer that question. So that is going to do it for us here today. Hope you learned something. We'll see you next time.